Hello and good morning. Thank you for joining me and my awesome co host, Morten Matheson. We blinked and a whole year flew away, it appears. And we are now on season 3 of your favorite Take Care podcast, the only podcast that brings social care and technology together. And today we have with us our esteemed guest, Darren Evans, CEO of AfterCloud. Welcome to Take Care, Darren.
Very good morning, Sanga. Very good morning, Morten. Really, really good to be here and have a very happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year and likewise. It's good to have you on board. I've seen you before and I think I've even seen you in real life before. And I'm really, really interested in who you are. Can you tell us a bit more about your story and how you got into social care?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I think that's mutual, Morten. Your name precedes you, which is great, I think. I've been working across health and social care, technology-wise, for about 25 years. And if you go back, one of the very, very first online platforms for social care provision, really, for rostering and monitoring. So going back to then, really, and I've been involved in social care technology ever since, in various guises, managing various businesses and coming up with various solutions. So it's been an interesting time. I think more so in the last few years, where technology has advanced even further, offering end-to-end solutions, which is I think really, really great. Yeah. So that's kind of my background.
Sounds good. And I was, of course, looking your LinkedIn up and trying to find out what journey you've been on. And I see that you've come from various roles in the Access Group, and now you're in I suppose, a somewhat smaller business. How's that change been for you?
Very, really insightful, actually, a pleasurable change, I have to say. It's an interesting one because I think working in smaller businesses within health and social care, it is fantastic, getting to know customers, going on that customer journey with them. And then obviously, you mentioned previously Access Group, huge business. I mean, very large acquisitional based business. Which I was involved with for a little while. And what's interesting, actually, if you see my background, it transpires that they've pretty much bought up every business that I've worked in.
That's good.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? They're now. I don't want to make this access driven, but they're now one of the largest. Well, they are the largest software business in the UK. Interestingly, so all credit to them. I hope that they continue to innovate, let's say, rather than stand still, because I think a lot of the innovations are coming from new startups and companies like yourself and Sanga and businesses that are really sort of cutting edge, leading edge where technology is concerned. So it's an interesting time.
It is indeed. But I'm more intrigued from the very start, if we can peel back to where you started. You started in military and HM force and then into technology. What are the few things that you perhaps take back from those days into now, which is I would say changing world in the world of social care?
Yeah, you're very true. So I started off as an apprentice in the forces and spent almost 9 years actually in the army as an instructor. And when I left, I actually went into banking and publishing. The two combined was quite extraordinary, actually.
Yeah.
So foreign exchange and sub custody and banking, and so managing publications. And then I got into communications and started traveling throughout the Middle East with satellite communications, Middle East communications, and various other forms. And then the internet came along, and of course all the balloons are in the air, and that was kind of where I changed from publishing to technology, and that's where my journey started with social care specifically. I guess the changes I've seen are dramatic because we've gone through that technological evolution really from what was initially paper driven based processes through to what are now largely, I mean, not completely, but largely technology-driven processes. There are still some out there that are, still using pen and paper. Interestingly, and what I found actually more recently is that some industries or communities, call them what you will, sectors, are still largely paper-based, and I find that incredible. Yeah.
That's true, and it often makes you think what are the cost benefit to having a pure paper-based manual industry to a much more tech-driven sector.
Yeah.
But you are doing fantastic work with your new startup on After Cloud. Tell us more about After Cloud and
That's very kind. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. Well, it stems back actually to my work. So I was, you know, busy working away as we all do within the community, and it was around just over 3 years ago now. My wife Pam and sister-in-law Cam were primary carers for my mother-in-law Mohinder, and she had a very aggressive form of Lewy body dementia. Awful time really for the family. And it was very very aggressive to the point that within months she died. And anyway, if we skip that period post the funeral, we were going through various photo albums. Actually, when you go through possessions and whatnot, we were going through a photo album with our son, who was kind of 11 and a half, I guess, there or thereabouts at the time. And he was questioning my wife about who's this, who's that, who are these people? And we had no idea. My wife had no idea. And with that, we realized very, very quickly that when a person dies, that whole library of information is gone. It's unless they've done something specific, you can't get it back. It's irretrievable. It's gone. So with that, my son said to me, "Dad, you work in technology. Not that I'm a technologist, but you work in the field, and can't you do something that will assist other families that find themselves in the same position?" And that was kind of the light bulb moment, really. So I reached out across the sector and spoke to people at varying levels, and we came across now. End of life was not my expert area I knew nothing really about end of life at that time, even though people had died throughout my lifetime. And we realized that there was this physical item. So going back to pen and paper, I guess, this physical item called a memory box. And what they do in end of life and palliative care is that they create this box, and in it they put letters and cards and gifts for future events. So what would potentially be posthumous. And with that, the sort of light bulb moment went off again, and we said, well, actually, we can take that and we can digitize that process and just shrink wrap it into an app. And that's exactly what we did. Yeah. So that was the start of Aftercloud. That was the start of our journey.
I have to just say, hearing what you're saying, it's very sympathetic. And I have still from my grandmother in the back of my closet, I have a small see-through plastic bag with a little teddy bear in. And once every year or so, I open it, and there's still the smell of my grandmother's apartment.
Oh,
And there
wonderful.
I quickly wrap it up again. And I remember a lot of things that I've forgotten otherwise, just because of that little scent of my grandmother.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that what you're doing now can enable such a feeling in many different ways and regards and with various media, so to speak. So I've really, really looked forward to seeing you here today and hearing more about it and hearing more about how people receive the experience. So can we go to that immediately? What do people say about using the app?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because we ran beta pilots for 10 months in real world settings. I think also just to build up our awareness, build the
Yeah.
brand, but also iterate and get feedback from real users. And one of the things we received was, look, this is great, works fantastically. We can post and da da da, but you never really get to find out until a person has died, and you get the feedback from the relatives.
Yeah.
And that has transformed because we've now got people. Well, one of the pieces of feedback we actually got through the beta was, we'd love to see our moments plotted almost chronologically to create life stories. And of course, life story work is imperative in older people's services. But again, it's traditionally paper based. So rather than iterate on the product itself, which was originally called Afterplan, it's just we changed it to moments, so the key moments in life. And then we created another app on the same technology stack called Timelines. And Timelines has almost become our de facto our sort of base platform, because it sort of enhances that life story work across a lot of sectors, and has a lot of applications, interestingly. So it's been a fantastic journey, stuff, and we're still continuing. We now provide to children's services with another app called Journals. So
Mhm.
it's evolving all the time. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's why I find your idea very, very inspiring as well, because it digitization and the digital tech stack, it's only an enabler in the process. The whole aspect of remembering, reminiscing, you know, s- recording those key moments, like you say,
Mm,
and so that you can all often go back and reflect, like Morton was saying, he goes back every year to get a sniff of that memory. These are priceless, and
absolutely.
using technology to translate that idea, translate that vision, I think it's a powerful way of making it much more future proof. So, what challenges did you face when you thought you will translate this idea with the technology angle?
One of the greatest challenges, and it still is a challenge today, I have to say, and that is getting to the people that really need the application. Um, People that are in receipt of palliative care in the community, or indeed in hospice, are very hard to reach, target base. Not that I'd like to use that language, but certainly within the community, they're very hard to reach. There are specific gatekeepers. It's a difficult one in the sense that the people that are closest to the ultimate, people that will use the platform, will use the service. Um, people closest to them are nurses, whereas the people that drive the business and make the decisions are chief execs, they're directors, they're sort of a little bit separated from the day-to-day minutiae of managing and caring, I guess. So that is a challenge in itself. One of the things that we've done to overcome that through timelines is create a direct-to-consumer based approach. And one of the interesting things we're doing this year, is we're a technology business for social good. And that's our strapline. What is social good, and what's our value in relation to social good? So one of the areas that we've looked at is gifting. So what we're looking to do this year is, and this is the first announcement of this actually you're getting
Wow.
on the show. But what we're looking to do is gift forward, so pay it forward model, in that
Ah,
if you buy a timeline. And I love intergenerational learning. I love the fact that
Mm,
children or grandchildren should be speaking with their grandparents and learning more about the history before it goes, and
absolutely.
that gets then plotted on a timeline. So for every timeline purchase, what we're looking to do is gift a moment to somebody, either in end of life, palliative care, or actually in receipt of dementia based services, because I think people living with dementia are a really important community, I think, for us as well.
Mm,
And we've
mm,
got two research projects underway as well, Strathclyde and Bedfordshire, both looking so healthy aging technologies and brain health, respectively, uh, where they're utilising both moments and timelines to sort of gather research and evidence best practice, because that's what we're all about.
it's funny that you just mentioned that at the end, because I was thinking that obviously, just from a very rational perspective here, I was going to say for a lot of people this will and must be transformative in many ways. But what evidence have you sort of collected besides hearsay over the last, yeah, or over your storyline, the company's storyline? So have you had any so far? Doesn't have to be proper research, but have you had any indication of where this is transformative? What is it that this really does to people?
Yeah, I mean, we've got individual feedback. The research is continuous; it's ongoing, and I don't know if you've worked with research partners before, but they take an awful long time to to
They
put
have
things
to.
together. But anyway, that aside, it's fantastic, because I think an evidence based approach is the best one.
Yeah.
So no, it's all anecdotal currently, Morton.
But you'll probably already have, even though anecdotal, I find that often to be as true as researchers is. But I still think some of that anecdotal evidence is evidence. So have you had anybody come back to you and say, or have some of the services using this on a more broad perspective, have they said, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're experiencing at least?
Yeah, and I think in that regard, it's generally families. I mean, we had
Yeah.
one. Well, I'll give you two instances. One was over the Christmas period where I took an afternoon out to spend time with a palliative care nurse that we're working with, and a younger guy that has younger children. And he's still alive now. He's got probably weeks, not very long. He's end of life.
Mm.
But wanted to leave some videos for his children. So we spent that afternoon just going through. I mean, he was thankful, but I think the real benefit will come downstream when those children have, the ability to look back at what their father has left them, and has taken the time out to prepare and do something for them.
Yeah.
Similarly, we've got, so interestingly, what our timelines app. When you publish a timeline, we also generate a QR code. So that QR code is as unique as the individual timeline. And the QR code can be placed anywhere. So we've got a couple of scenarios there as well. One is we've got a monumental mason in the north of the country in Leeds, Leeds, sorry, who have put a QR code on a headstone in their showroom to show people, effectively you can go up to a headstone, click on the QR code and see someone's life story.
Wow.
So that's transformative. And then I heard a little bit before Christmas, so back end of November time, somebody else fairly local to us in Oxfordshire, they want to generate a timeline for their brother who died last year. But what they're doing at the moment is they want to put it on a bench, which is on the River Thames. It's an area, a spot, I think up near Marlow, where the lady's brother used to visit, or frequent. And but they're going through the challenges now of getting permission to put the bench where they want to put the bench. But again, her feedback has been fantastic because it's paying that respect to her brother, which she wants to do.
As you were sharing these case studies, or you'd say life stories, I had one thought with regards to your memory and timeline. I think it could eventually also aid with dementia. People who have dementia and other Alzheimer striking to them, because again, if you're capturing the timeline and the music, we all know music takes us back to stages of our life, and if we're able to plot that, you will be able to take those people back to their period of their time, which will enable them to start remembering those memories again and have a transformative experience again. I'm not sure if you have started thinking in that direction,
Oh
Darren,
no, you're
already.
absolutely right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we do. So one of the research projects I mentioned about brain health is utilizing timelines. What we're looking to do is we start with our date of birth. So who's the timeline for what's your date of birth? So it takes you back to the date of birth anyway. And certainly with relation to cognitive improvements, what we're looking to do is introduce music at key pivotal moments, because that spark, it's a bit like Morton talking about the smell. So that music and smell and taste, interestingly, those three things will take you back to a certain point in time, a certain date, a place, something you've done, a historical event. And music, you're absolutely right, is the same thing. So what we're looking to do is introduce music on the timeline to improve cognitive recall for people living with dementia. But that is, again, that's another challenge in its ongoing work. But yeah,
There's a huge potential in this area. I've worked with a couple of, and we also see that in Sequoia, there's the possibility to add photos and story timelines just in photos though, and just on that, we had a funny story of a guy who was living somewhere outskirts Denmark, whose sister lived in Australia, and obviously they hadn't seen each other for many years, and he was now in a nursing home, and when he got Sequoia, or they got Sequoia in his care home, they started showing him these photos of him and his sister, and he had worked in the rails and all of these things. And suddenly they said, from being what they often refer to in a colloquial way, a grumpy old man, he was now suddenly a spark of stories they hadn't heard before. He was listening to music
Yeah.
and all of these bits and pieces, multi-sensory, just got him to a whole new. I don't know if I can call it well-being or quality of life, but he was definitely changing his behavior just from the very small pieces, which in comparison with what you're doing is nothing. So I will say, anecdotally or whatever, there is gold hidden here, gems here. It's
Well, I
interesting to
appreciate
hear.
that, Morton. A couple of things I'll pick up on that is music is absolutely transformative. Um, if you or I or Sangha hears a piece now, it instantly transports you back to that, and it's the same for older people or
Mm,
anybody actually living with dementia. It's the same. But going back to systems and processes, one thing we love to do over time is through APIs is drive the data that we collect and some of
Hmm.
the content that we collect back into the care plan.
mm.
I think that will be really enhancing, not only from a data perspective, but for the individuals. I
Yeah,
think,
there's a definite link between what you do as a professional with Morton as an individual and what Morton can do on his own. And
yeah,
that interlink can be deeply developed, of course. So I really think that's an interesting perspective of what you're doing.
I think
Yeah,
it's more. Sorry, Sangha. I think it's more person centered as well because what you're doing is taking the thoughts, the processes, the wishes of the individual. Rather than
Mm.
operational or clinical top down, it's sort of bottom up. And I kind of like that. I like that way of working.
Yeah, there's a fantastic, just to build on that, there's a fantastic care home that I know of who are working with a very different, less medical model way of treating people that live with dementia. And what one of their sort of approaches predominantly represent is what you're describing just there. They're
Mm.
working a lot more with the person's background and trying to find hooks in that background, in their life story, to make them feel more comfortable and make them access that room in that person where they can have connections. And that makes their use of medication drop severely.
Yeah, I think also for new carers, if they can click on let's say, the QR code for a timeline and see that person, understand their history, understand their backstory,
Mm.
I think they'll be able to apply a lot more person-centered care for the individual, and I think that applies for new carers as well. If you're caring for someone and you know the person, you know their history, their background, their likes, their dislikes, etc. You're more akin to provide that real care.
yeah, absolutely. And we often discuss in this podcast and elsewhere as well that quality of life and quality of care are the two KPIs that the sector should measure
Oh,
consistently and
100%.
religiously. And when we talk about quality of life, it's not just like you were saying, the operational, the process related, the care related aspect. It's life that we should try and translate from these life stories. And I think text like this will eventually enable us to capture those moments, to really start capturing what the quality of life has been, and whether any care provider has been able to impact that quality of life KPI. And I'm a big proponent of data, as you both know. And I think we are at the top of the iceberg now, and this is going to become a big thing in the future.
Yeah, I believe, I think you're both, both leading in the sector in terms of technology provision, which is fantastic. And we've sort of, we're the conduit, if you like, the sort of the piece that sort of div- we bridge the gap really from life and legacy. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess. Yeah.
That's a very good round off and leads over into us asking our season 3 questions.
Yes.
Da-da-da-da.
Da-da-da. So, Darren, what is your one prediction for the next 12 months for social care?
Oh, I see a lot more. interconnectivity, interoperability between health and social care. I think that's already started. NHS Digital have already provided a list of platform providers that are ready for integration into the health system. So I think there'll be a lot more streamlined processes in place, long overdue. I think that there'll need to be a lot more budget strategy driven to social care provision. We've been the poor cousin for a long, long time. And again, that's starting to change. So I see a lot more in relation to that. And for after cloud, who knows? We'll see. I'm I'm forever the optimist.
You've already told us of great things you're working on this year, so yeah, we're
Well,
looking
that's very
forward to
kind. Thank
following
you.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that leads us to the final question. We have this is the new thing that we want to do as part of season 3
Mhm.
is request you to ask a question that you want to ask our next guest, who you don't know we have yet.
Uh, well, I think for any new guest, it will be what inspired your what inspired you to do what you do right now? I think that it's a great opening line, isn't it? And we've all got a story to tell. Yeah,
That's so
everybody's got
true.
a story to tell. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think often, I'm so surprised. I think this is one of the questions we'll most likely ask each other at any event, won't we? How did you either come into social care, thereby also asking that question? And a
yeah,
lot of people have such interesting stories.
it's
It's very
amazing, isn't it?
values and meaning driven to be in
Yeah,
this sector, isn't it?
yeah, it is
Yes.
actually. That's the one thing I will say. The people that you meet in social care, are driven from passion. I think even from a care perspective. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, it's driven with passion, that's one thing I love about the community.
Agreed.
absolutely. That's great. Thank you very much, Darren. And we could have continued again and again. I have more questions for you, maybe perhaps for a later on session once again. But thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, and I'm really thankful for your time, both. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Sang. It's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share your favorite Take Care podcast with your friends and colleagues. Until we meet next week, take care.